Here I am. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Hour. I am your host, Sarah Fargo O'Brien. I am back for another Thursday's show. June has been all over the place. I hope you guys could hear my music. I was at a music festival last weekend, and that was a band I got to listen to. That's a song I got to listen to live. I hope you got to hear that this morning. I was trying to give you something a little different as I start the show here. As you guys know, it always takes me kind of a minute to get myself going. And my dogs are joining me upstairs today in my office. So there could potentially be some more noise. I don't know. We'll find out. Depends on their mood. What else? Let me get my slide deck back up here. Okay, today we're going to be talking about criticism. Last week we talked about validation. We could maybe think about, sorry guys, I will explain. I'm a little under the weather. I will explain why that's the case. Okay, criticism we can think about as maybe like the, almost like the antithesis or opposite of validation. Criticism doesn't always have to be negative, but it's often taken as negative. Whereas validation would tell us like, it makes sense, it's okay that we feel that way. Criticism would say something we've done, something we've said, something we believe, some way we've performed is not okay, and something needs to be adjusted. Not that it's wrong or bad, just not what we're looking for. So criticism would be something about what we're not looking for and need adjustment on. And we're going to get into some more of that today. If you didn't see the show last week on validation, I encourage you to go back and check that out. Validation is very important. Self-validation is where it starts. You guys hear me talk a lot about, and if you read and follow any of my posts, a lot about self-work, learning how to self-validate as part of that self-work. When we can self-validate how we feel, we can maybe handle criticism better. So we're going to get into that. Let's see who's joining me this morning. Good morning, Andrew. Thank you. Andrew says, good morning to the wonderful Sarah. Nice blue summer top, friend. Thank you. It feels so much like summer here. It's ridiculous. The heat index in Richmond, Virginia has been about 110 degrees every day this week. It's been so hot and so humid. It's not very comfortable to be outside. This is how it was last weekend. I was in Virginia Beach at a huge music festival. Tons of people there, lots of people passing out because of the heat and maybe not drinking enough water. But other than that, it was like pretty safe. There were no issues. People got along. I met some cool people, heard some fantastic live music, and it is what makes my world go around. Who else is with us? Good morning, Leanna in the house. So happy to see you, Leanna, supporting me frequently. Thank you, my friend, for joining in. Okay, let me do a little bit of an update for you guys. And then we'll do our 3 deep breaths, and then we'll dive into the content. But don't be shy. Comment. Let me know you're here. I'll kind of toggle back and forth. So I sound like this because probably for a number of reasons. Before I was in Virginia Beach for the music festival, the weekend prior to that, I was in Detroit and Dearborn, Michigan, visiting my lovelies, Famia and Julie and Katie, and we had our leadership coffee and just connecting some with the local community. We got to witness the No King's Day march going on, protest march going on. It was a really good experience. And I think somewhere along the way or in my travel, I picked up a little cold or something, even though I was doing my best to be cautious. And so about right as the time I was preparing to leave for the music festival, started to notice some of the scratching and the coughing and the sniffling. Then I went to this music festival, and our Airbnb bed was extremely uncomfortable and too small for my spouse and I. So I got very little sleep, 3 nights in a row. And then I stood in the blistering heat for about 12 hours a day for 2 days. So this is why I did not get better faster. And I've come back now, and I'm still sort of battling whatever kind of this cold is. I don't feel terrible. I just sound terrible. And I apologize for being more hoarse than usual, for sniffling, for coughing, and for all the things that are going to take place in today's show. This is what being human is about. I show up in my human capacity most of the time, regardless. This is when I've been in a bad place emotionally. Today, not feeling the best physically, although it's definitely been worse. And other times when I'm in a great space, right? Like, this is the human condition. We cannot show up the same way every single day or in every single context. And so I like that to be a part of the show for you guys, just to see like the human part of me, and that I am not perfect. This also gives me some space to validate myself and not being perfect, and sounding hoarse and coughing all through a podcast show, because perfectionist me would be like, not acceptable, do something different, record it at a different time, figure it out, Sarah. But in the healing space for Sarah, we show up as is, and we accept self as is, and really, 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 really working hard on that. And then therefore really, really, really working hard on accepting others as is. However, that doesn't mean that we don't ever get criticism from time to time, which is what we're going to dive into today. So this morning I did a little bit of cleaning. I did not get out and walk my dog because it's blistering hot already, and I did not want to be dripping in sweat before the show. Like, I got enough to contend with, right? I didn't need that. I have a meeting for a new position that I will be starting in the fall with Cleveland State University. Shout out to Katie Kurtz for that connection. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to working with social work students in the fall who are attending Cleveland State. And then I have some writing and some other stuff going on today. Stay tuned, guys. The Timeless Therapist newsletter will be out on LinkedIn either later today or tomorrow. So that's where I'm at. Let me know where you are. What is your human thing today? How are you being human and not perfect and not a robot? I won't go into more of that because that'll just put me on my soapbox. But follow me, go follow me, and read what I've been posting about recently, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. So if you want to get grounded, get present, get connected to yourself in the moment, take 3 deep breaths with me, in through your nose, out through your mouth. If you elongate that exhale, it will sort of create that calming feeling in your nervous system, in your body, in your brain. So here we go. Breath number 1, breathe in and out. Number 2, in and out. Last time. In through your nose and out. Okay. So I'll be over here on the side and talking about criticism. If you have comments, you have questions, your own experiences with this, please let me know. Criticism, what is it? How do we handle it? And most importantly, how do we handle it in healthy and productive ways? Nobody enjoys criticism, but our response to it can maybe determine our nervous system activation or our nervous system calm and regulation that we experience in the midst of receiving criticism. So we're going to talk about what it is and how do we handle it using emotional intelligence skills and trauma-informed care skills. So you heard me say earlier this morning that last week we talked about validation, and self-validation is kind of where it starts. If you can't validate your own feelings and your own experiences, it will likely be difficult to be open to hearing other people's experiences and feelings and then validating those. Okay, so that self-validation piece is important. Self-responsibility, self-leadership is a main pillar in trauma-informed care skills. And of course, you cannot have any trauma-informed care skills if you do not have emotional intelligence. They kind of go hand in hand. You can't be emotionally illiterate or emotionally ignorant and then think that you are going to be trauma-informed. That is never going to work. So we're going to come at how we handle this ourselves. So the self-leadership, self-responsibility part of trauma-informed care and trauma-informed leadership. You guys often hear me talking about this from like, how do we do it with others? But how we do it with ourselves is where we start. Like, we have to be responsible in leading ourselves well, to think that and to then practice leading others well. So we're going to talk about like what some of those skills are, how do we apply them to receiving criticism, and in a way that, we manage criticism in the best possible way for our nervous system, rather than making it worse for our nervous system to hear and receive criticism. So we're going to talk about the definition. What is it? Mindset. How do we think about or interpret criticism? Actions. How do we respond to criticism without overreacting? And impact. What is the impact of responding well to criticism or responding to criticism with trauma-informed principles and practices? So, definitions. What is it? I probably have more than one here, as I often do. Let's see what I put on the slide deck a few days ago that I already don't remember, guys. This gives me my cues too, right? And so I hope you find this information helpful, as well as the slide deck to follow along helpful, because I certainly do. Okay, criticism generally refers to the act of evaluating, analyzing, and offering judgments or opinions. Now, judgments and opinions don't necessarily have to be negative. They're just interpreted as negative when we talk about criticism. But a judgment is not inherently negative. It's maybe judging something as accurate, judging something as effective, judging something as efficient. That's not necessarily right or wrong or good or bad. It depends on what we're looking at. Okay. So let me say that again. Criticism generally refers to the act of evaluating, analyzing, and offering judgments or opinions about something, like I said, such as a work of art, literature, film, or a person's actions, beliefs, or behavior. However, it's not necessarily a negative judgment. Like I was saying, the construction of a judgment. So criticism can also be said or defined this way. It is the construction of a judgment about the negative or positive qualities of someone or something. We often think of criticism as negative, but it's not necessarily. And we need to keep that in mind, even though me, along with everybody else, likely tends to interpret criticism as negative, or it feels punitive, harsh, critical in a negative sense when we're receiving it. Leanna, Andrew, anybody else in the audience, is this true for you? Do you often feel as though criticism is something negative, or do you come from a place as if it could be positive? It's not necessarily something you're doing wrong or bad, right? But it just could be a judgment on how effective things are. Where do you stand with it? How does it land on you, just as we talk about criticism before we get into more of the details? Okay, I talk about a mindset with criticism, and some of this I'm taking from all kinds of places, guys. So for those of you who are new to tuning in, or this is the first one of my shows you're watching, A little bit about me is I am a psychotherapist. I've been a practicing psychotherapist, a licensed clinical social worker for over 15 years. So some of mindset comes from what I know from psychotherapy practice, what I know from neuroscience and the brain and mental health. The other half of things that I do is trauma-informed leadership training, speaking, teaching, and consulting. And in that, and in some of my own leadership training, particularly some things with Brene Brown's Dare to Lead leadership certification program, mindset and our beliefs come into play frequently when we are interacting with other people, especially if we're in a leadership position. That means giving criticism, receiving criticism. And one of the things that we talked about in that leadership training is like, where do we even start? Do you know your scripts? Do you know the things you believe already about this? How is that impacting your ability to either give objective criticism or receive it without reacting intensely in your nervous system or in your emotions? So I bring some from that into this, as well as what we know about trauma-informed care and trauma-informed leadership, which is that it starts with the self. And if we are not self-aware and if we have not done our self-work, including our beliefs, views, opinions, and mindset around these things, then we're probably lacking awareness about how we show up when criticism is in the room, whether we're giving it or receiving it. And this is important for health and wellness, first and foremost, as I am a mental health care provider, but it is also important for leadership, for interactions with people, for people work, service delivery, all of that kind of thing. Team leads. I mean, certainly if you're in a position of leadership, then we need to know our own stuff and know how it impacts us or how it shows up before we can, do anything effective or with the idea of causing the least amount of harm for others. Let me take a pause real quick before I get into mindset. And Andrew renounces with a capital yes that he also interprets criticism as negative, even though the definition tells us that the judgment could be a positive judgment. We just don't call it that, right? If we have a positive judgment on something, we call it a praise or positive reinforcement or an affirmation or an accolade, right? But maybe it's a positive criticism about what we're doing. It's a positive judgment about what we're doing. But that is hard for us. And I feel you, Andrew. It's the same for me. I don't hear criticism go, I'm sure that's going to be good news. That's not what happens for me either. Some of that probably has to do with mindset. So, Andrew, I'm going to encourage you to think about these things as well, your mindset about going into criticism. What are your beliefs, thoughts, experiences, and considerations when it comes to criticism? What are your past experiences with it? Have it all always been negative? Like the criticism you get is negative. What are your beliefs about it? What did you learn from your family system? Did they talk about getting criticized at work? Did they criticize you? I got criticized a ton in my family. I hate criticism because it activates my trauma responses. It feels like my negative and toxic family system basically telling me I'm wrong, everything is about me is wrong, and I need to work harder and do better. And no matter how much I work harder and do better, it's never enough. Like that feels like constant criticism from my home life. And when criticism shows up in other places now, it kind of plucks that space in my brain and my body, and it's like, yeah, let's get defensive, Sarah. It's time to protect yourself because getting defensive and protecting myself is a trauma response. So if criticism activates my trauma, I'm going to respond in the way and that I'm thinking that it's dangerous when really it's just like hurtful or harmful and like triggering that part before where it was dangerous to receive criticism all the time and not defend myself because it was from my caretakers and from my family system. So that's important. And next, what messages, scripts, or learning have you adopted about criticism? I mean, we can talk about a script right now that a lot of us are carrying around, and it's that criticism equal bad, criticism equal negative judgment, criticism equal critical negative feedback about something we're doing, have done, produced, or whatever, or maybe even something we believe. So just like Andrew's saying a resounding yes to when he thinks about criticism, he thinks about it that it being negative. That is a script. That is a script. It's a learning that we have from somewhere that's just sort of playing around in our brain. And he says, wow, great news that it doesn't have to be negative and that we can think about it differently. But we really need to pay attention to these messages and early learning and past experiences with criticism and knowing how that impacts the current now moment when criticism shows up in the room. So some other things to consider around your mindset and your beliefs and how you show up now with criticism is, how do you give criticism? How do you receive criticism? And how does your nervous system respond to criticism? I just told you that my nervous system responds to criticism as if it's a threat, and the angry defender comes out, which again, if anybody has listened to me before, you know that anger is Sarah's number one trauma response. So if I'm angry about something, it 95% of the time it probably plucked a past trauma experience in my nervous system, in my body, and I'm kind of off to the races in an activation or like an automatic reaction. So I have to be extremely mindful about criticism. And so my nervous system responds intensely quickly and with anger to criticism. And so if I'm going to be given feedback, whether they call it criticism or not, feedback of any kind, I need to be prepared. I would like to know in advance. I maybe need to have my body and my nervous system ready to receive that feedback that my whole system intakes potentially as criticism. So do you know what your beliefs are? Do you know what your scripts are? How do you receive criticism? Leanna, Andrew, anybody else in the audience, please tell me how you receive criticism, and or if you recognize how your nervous system responds to criticism. All right, now we're going to get into like how we can handle criticism well, right? How do we manage criticism in our bodies, in our brains, in our mental health, in our physical health, in the present moment, using emotional intelligence and trauma-informed care skills for ourselves. So this is about receiving criticism and using trauma-informed care principles to self-manage or regulate so that you can receive criticism in the healthiest way possible for you and your nervous system, and in the healthiest way possible to preserve the relationship between you and the person giving you the feedback or criticism. Okay. This is trauma-informed care in action. So if you are a person giving criticism, you need to know this, and the relationship needs to be important to you on the back end, not just the information. And if you are receiving criticism, trauma-informed care is important in being able to handle that feedback well without throwing you into a dysregulation, which is not only going to impact your nervous system, but is going to potentially impact your relationship with the person giving you criticism. Andrew has an interesting point here. He would say it depends on the tone used by the person giving the criticism. Sure. Yeah. And tone and understanding how that is happening is both an emotional intelligence skill and a trauma and care and leadership skill. Like, you need to know how you show up. Say a little bit more about that, Andrew, as I go into some of our actions and responses that we can take when we receive criticism to handle it with trauma-informed care principles for our own self-responsibility and managing things that might be difficult for our nervous systems. It's not the person who's giving us the criticisms responsibility to manage our nervous system reactions to them giving us the criticism. It is our responsibility to manage our reactions to receiving criticism. Now, if something like this is happening, like Andrew is saying, like the tone has a certain inflection that doesn't feel good to us, and we've handled the criticism with trauma-informed care in the moment, but we want to address how it was delivered to us, then you can do that, but do that at a later time, not in the moment that you're receiving the criticism. Kind of take note that you didn't like the delivery and address the delivery with that person later. In the moment, try to just accept the criticism using these trauma-informed care skills to keep your nervous system sort of at an equilibrium, or to keep yourself from getting dysregulated emotionally. Ideally, we want to stay grounded when receiving criticism. And if we are in a trauma activation, we are not grounded. If we are in emotional dysregulation, we are not grounded. If we are defensive or thinking of a rebuttal, we are not grounded in the present and connected to our body in this moment right now. And so that's a really huge part of trauma-informed care and trauma-informed leadership, is being present. And that means being present with yourself and what's happening in your body and what you're feeling, and finding ways to manage that so that you can be present. And if you absolutely can't be present, right, then you need to find some other ways that you step away and manage that. But in terms of receiving feedback or criticism, we want to try to stay present and engaged. So some actions: remain calm, engage in active listening. So active listening is hearing to hear the information, not to respond or defend or explain, right? It's like really trying to hear what the other person is saying. And I think if we focus on really trying to hear what the other person is saying, instead of like what that's kicking up in us or how that's making us feel, but really trying to hear it, the information coming through, that can maybe be something that helps us remain present. Really active listening is just that. It's very active. It's not a passive skill. And so if we're engaging in that, it's more likely that we're going to stay present in our bodies and with the other person in the room giving the criticism. Emotional reactions can easily shut down productive conversations. Like I'm saying, if we want to preserve the relationship, if you want to preserve your reputation, particularly if this is at work or an organization where you do work, you want to be mindful about your reaction to criticism. So some tips: pause before responding, listen without interrupting. This is the active listening. Just try to take it all in. If you have questions, there will be time to ask them later. Try to take it in first. Repeat key points to confirm understanding. That's also part of active listening, is reflecting back like what you're hearing. Okay, so in the moment, we want to remain calm, engage in active listening without interrupting, and reflecting key points. This is sort of showing not only are we present, but we're taking in the information. Okay, I hear you. This is what I hear you saying. This is what I interpret you saying. Is that correct? Okay, great. We're on the same page. We keep going. Okay, then you, the person receiving criticism, using trauma-informed care skills, want to take time to absorb the information that you've received and process it. Immediate reactions or responses usually come from emotion and not from reflection. So they've taken 15 minutes to give you this feedback, and then you immediately have a response. Maybe we just need to not, and we need to pause and say, thank you for the feedback. Let me chew on this. Let me absorb this. Let me marinate in this. Let me take some time with this, whatever you want to say, and circle back to you if I have anything else to say or any questions. Would that be okay? Right? Hopefully it is. So step away as needed. Write down key points to reflect on, or understanding or clarification that you've made and you're reflecting back, and schedule a follow-up to discuss. So walk away from the criticism just with the information that you gathered and the active listening, and repeating and reflecting what you heard. Make sure you have the information down accurately, and then step away from the whole interaction, whether it's for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, until your next one-on-one, whatever the case may be, to absorb this and reflect on it. Reflecting on something doesn't mean just like, okay, like I wrote all this down, I'm putting it over here, and then in a week we'll talk about it and I don't look at it again. That's not reflecting on it. You need to actually go back and look at it before you follow up with the person who gave you the criticism, to actually process through, absorb. What do you think about that? What are your responses to that? Does it make sense? Are you immediately defensive? We need to let that dissipate some, then go back and look at it again. This is how reflection works. Okay, and so then when we are in that reflection processing space with the stuff we've written down, when we were receiving the criticism, we want to separate our feelings from facts. Again, this is almost like using active listening in your reflection, right? Or like trying to come on with that objective stance in reviewing even what you have written down about the criticism. Be really careful not to personalize this as like you as a person. It could be your productivity, your performance, your behavior, sure, but not you as a person. It's likely something you are doing or not doing that you're getting criticism about, not something that you are or are not as a person. So personalizing can block ability to gain valuable insights. If we personalize it, we say like, it's because they don't like us. It's because I'm not good at anything. It's because I've always been bad at this, that kinds of things. We're not really going to get valuable insights. Number one, we're just beating ourselves up. Number two, we're kind of missing the point. Like it's not like the idea with criticism is like, it's not meant to be a barrage. It's meant to actually like be a judgment on something that you're doing and to give you feedback, essentially to then make adjustments to do it differently or better in the future. Hello, friend. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about criticism and how to use trauma-informed care skills to respond in the moment effectively and in healthy ways for us when receiving criticism. Let us know if you have experiences with criticism and how it makes you feel. Okay, so how do we focus on not personalizing the feedback and separating feelings from facts when we go back and reflect on what we've heard? Okay, we want to focus on what's being said over delivery of the message. Okay, I talked about this just a minute ago in referencing what Andrew said about criticism, saying like how he receives it depends on the tone used by the person giving it. Okay, and I hear that, but we don't have control over that, Andrew. We don't have control over other people. We don't have control over the delivery of the criticism. If you do not like the delivery, it is something you can circle back to later. But in the moment, we are just trying to get the message, like the meat and potatoes, the information from the criticism, like what is actually being said, the facts of it, rather than our feelings about it or our feelings about how they delivered it. For the best trauma-informed care response for you and your nervous system is to stay in the information, stay in the facts. Let's try to stay away from feelings altogether about the criticism information, by the chunk of information itself. The person who gave you the criticism and had poor delivery, you can address later. And if they had poor delivery, I suggest you address it later. But we are talking about what you can do to be in control of yourself, the self-responsibility and the self-leadership, and how you manage and receive the criticism despite what's said and how it is said to you. Okay. Now, what we could say about that is if their delivery is poor, is that they're not using trauma-informed care or emotional intelligence to deliver the criticism, but we can't control that. And we don't have responsibility over that. We have responsibility over how we take that basically in the moment. So look for truth in the feedback, the things that you could take in, and try to view this criticism, this feedback, even if you don't like it, as a chance to grow. Even if you don't like the way they delivered it, can you find any nuggets of truth in the information and go with that? Andrew, what are you saying you know to? You know what? That we can only control ourselves? Help me out there. Okay, some more trauma-informed care skills we can use applied to the self when receiving criticism. Okay, we can ask clarifying questions. So if we're receiving information, not only reflecting back what we heard, but if we don't understand something or something is not clear, then we can ask for clarification about what they mean. If they're giving you information, right, about your performance, about efficiency, whatever, and it's not really clear, then ask some questions. Vague criticism is not useful for actual growth. Now, again, we can't control what they're doing. We can only control what we're doing. And if you are confused, and let me also say, like, if I get confused, that's like almost always also a nervous system reaction for me. Like, I do not like being confused. And so that's another one where I'll get really irritable and really angry really fast if I don't understand stuff. And so that can spiral really quickly for me. And sometimes I forget that I need to pause and ask a question, and then I could like understand what's happening. Now I'm queen of questions. Love asking questions if I don't understand something. But if I get confused or too much is coming too fast, I can like forget to do that. Meaning like I can get triggered or activated much faster than it's like, oh yeah, Sarah, ask a question and then maybe you won't be confused. Because when I start to spiral around being confused, I'm getting mad that the other person is not clear. I'm getting mad that the other person is nitpicking or being vague and not giving me actual information, right? That's not helping me receive the criticism. That's me getting activated in my nervous system and getting dysregulated in my emotions. So again, we are talking about you, us, we, not the other. We can't control them. So if they are giving vague criticism, what you can do and what you have control over in the moment is asking questions so that you understand. Not so that you know their feelings about it or share your feelings about it, but so that you actually understand the information given to you. What is the feedback? Okay. Request specific examples. Seek clarity rather than assuming, right? Like if I get confused, my assumptions are like, I should already know this and I don't. What's wrong with me? They think I should already know this. And it just spirals, man. For me, it's like anger and irritability is so fast. And it can be directed inward or outward or both at the same time. But I'll be quick to assume, that I'm dumb, versus like I missed a piece of information, to do this differently. Maybe that's the feedback. And then, of course, you can ask for specific improvement suggestions. If it's not clear to you, then you take control of clarifying things for yourself so that you can take in the information. Okay. We can't necessarily expect other people to say things in a way that makes sense for us. Sometimes we have to ask questions about that. That doesn't make them wrong, the person giving the criticism, and it doesn't make you wrong. It just means like, we need some more information so that we're on the same page and we both understand the information that is coming out. Try to control your urges to justify. Defensiveness often prevents us from taking in new learning, right? Like, I'll be quick to not listen to a damn thing you're saying to me if I'm defensive. I don't care what you're telling me. You could tell me, Sarah, get in the car right now. The zombies are coming for us and we need to like get away. And if it's like set in a way or whatever, and I'm, getting defensive, I'm not going to be able to do anything that's healthy for me. And I'm not going to listen to you. I don't care if it's for my own good. I am not taking it in that moment. And so this is something for me, I really have to be mindful of, which is why I have to sort of be ready to receive feedback, and potentially doing something for myself in the moment. If I am receiving feedback or criticism, I probably need a fidget item, something in my hands. I maybe need something cold. I probably need my water nearby. I need kind of something to do because it's going to be hard for me to sit in the room and be present and not fall into an assumption, being defensive, shutting down. So try to control your urges to justify when you are receiving feedback or criticism. So instead, try saying things like this: I see what you mean. Acknowledge the feedback before responding to it. Yes, I heard you say blank. Don't make excuses or use blame shifting, right? Like, this is the idea of like, well, so-and-so didn't give me this piece of information that I missed and therefore did this incorrectly. Okay, well, maybe that person's going to get some feedback, but that's not really part of your feedback. What you could do is take in that you missed a piece of information, and then in your reflection think, well, how did I miss that piece of information? Was somebody supposed to give it to me? Was I supposed to seek it out? Was it written somewhere and I missed it? Like when we take time to reflect and process, we maybe get to like some other reasons or examples that we didn't do something the most effectively. And it's not really to blame anybody else. It's just giving us an opportunity to look at all pieces of the information and sort of find our place in it without all of this emotionality and reactivity. Because that reactivity is actually not good for you. It's not good for your nervous system. It's outputting cortisol. That stress hormone is not good for your body, brain, physiology, health, physical health, mental health, right? So you managing and controlling your reactivity to receiving criticism is healthy and good for you. It's also unhealthy and good for the situation. It's also healthy and good for your relationship with the person giving you the criticism, whether or not that person cares about the relationship with you. All of these things are good for healing and not causing further harm. You can cause further harm to yourself by not managing things in a healthy and appropriate way. That's why it's important to go through some of these action steps and using these skills to manage and absorb and deal with criticism. And now, we want to really take it far. You can try gratitude, expressing appreciation for the other person taking the time to give you feedback, endorses trust and open communication. Again, we want to try to view the criticism as an opportunity for growth. Thank the person for their input. They didn't have to give it to you. They could have said it to somebody else behind your back. They could have put it in your performance evaluation and never had a conversation with you, right? So there is a piece that no matter how they deliver it, if somebody's willing to give you feedback and criticism, then to some degree, like they care about how well you're doing it and maybe like giving you some things to do things more effectively or better. And then, and it shows that you value their feedback, right? And so again, all of this is about self-leadership and using trauma-informed care to lead yourself into healthier responses and into places that increase pathways for safety and reduce pathways for harm. So if we can remain open, if we can pause, if we can control defensiveness and assumptions, if we can ask clarifying questions and use active listening and actually take in the information, it is better for our nervous systems, which is better for our healing, which is increasing pathways for safety, both in our body and in this situation, and reducing the pathways to harm, which is reactivity. And that can cause harm in your body in and of itself, and reactivity that can cause harm in the relationship with the person giving you criticism. Okay, like that harm is a disruption, whether it's internally or externally, and it doesn't feel good for us. So there are ways that we can reduce that by using trauma-informed care principles. That's why I talk about this. That's the whole point of trauma-informed care. It doesn't differentiate or discriminate. It is approaching people with an incredible amount of empathy and openness and curiosity, including yourself, and giving things space and time to reduce reactivity, because that is part of what causes harm for everybody. Okay, final action, 7 here. Take action and then follow up. So ignoring feedback without taking any action damages your credibility and potentially leads to repeated mistakes. So identify and then do one actionable change based on the feedback. If you need a specific example of an actionable change that you can make, you can ask the person giving you the criticism, like we talked about back over here. Request specific examples, ask for specific improvement suggestions. So you can do one thing, but you can ask specifically, like, what's the one thing you want me to focus on here? What's the one thing you want me to improve on, and how do you want me to go about doing that? Okay, you can ask those kinds of questions. Share with the person giving you the criticism how you're applying their input and feedback, and follow up. This shows your commitment to adjusting things based on their feedback. Again, do all of this before we address their delivery of the feedback if you did not like the delivery, or the delivery landed on you weirdly or activated some stuff or whatever. Try to get through this whole receive criticism, absorb it, follow up, and make a change process. Do all of that and then say, okay, hey, I did my best to take all this in. I understand what you're saying. I got the information. I am willing and able and already implementing the suggestion that you made. However, the way that you approached me with the feedback and criticism was difficult for me, or I didn't like it, or it felt condescending, or whatever you want to say. Be appropriate about it, but it's fine to address it after the fact. For your nervous system regulation, let's try to get through the criticism first and then deal with how their delivery landed on you, the impact on you, the feelings that kicked up on you afterwards. Let me give you a couple of examples of receiving criticism and using these skills in which to receive criticism well and reduce harm to you and your own nervous system, and reduce harm to relationships by receiving criticism well in using trauma-informed care skills. Okay. So I have a client who has managed to work their way up from, I think, front desk staff at a gym to management at a gym to a whole new position where he is making sure gyms in his region are up to snuff, basically, and representing the company well. So he's moved up in positions here, and along the way, some of the very high up executive team at this place where he works, there is one person in particular, although he often says this about anybody who gives him feedback. And sometimes he asks for it directly and sometimes not. And they just give it directly and say, hey, you did this or said this in a meeting. In the future, I would think about doing X, Y, and Z. Or you said this in this email and sent it to this person, but really you needed to add these other folks to it for their input, whatever the case may be. These are some examples of feedback that he's gotten over the years. And even when he talks about it in therapy, he calls it coaching rather than criticism or feedback or reinforcement or anything. He says when somebody takes the time to tell him to do this instead of that, or that he did this well, so do that again, or whatever the case may be, he calls it coaching. And he's always appreciative of their time, of them taking the time to coach him in something, to help him get better at something. No matter how it's delivered, although sometimes in therapy he processes and invents how it was delivered and how he feels about it, he usually responds to the person giving him the feedback in the same way. He's appreciative of their time in coaching him in this area and helping him improve. He often doesn't take it so much as they're calling me out on not doing something well. It's they're taking the time to help me improve. And that's how he views it, which is fantastic. That's a very emotionally intelligent approach. It helps him from getting all dysregulated. Even when he talks to me about it in sessions, and he has feelings about this or that, they're not so big and intense that he can't manage them or talk about them or even understand his feelings in the moment about it. He can. Okay, so that's one example. That would be much harder for me. I have some work to do in the gratitude, in the viewing it as positive part of my trauma-informed care skills when it comes to criticism and how I self-lead around that. But let me give you an example from my own experience with receiving feedback. I can only really think of this one example because this is like the most pointed that stands out to me. And it's not the best one because I did not like the feedback. However, in the moment, I do actually think I handled it well. Later, I was more upset about it in my processing, but over time, I have some different views about it. But in the moment, it was important for me to take it in for the context I was in, for the job that I was in. So I was like, in my one-to-one meeting with my supervisor at my last agency job, every now and again, it was either at every monthly meeting that we had for the whole greater, bigger adult team, that there was an opportunity to discuss client cases or difficult client cases or what do we do or whatever. And so I had one time to discuss talking about it in my one-on-one with my supervisor, and we're going through it. And then she's sort of basically like breaking it down and, telling me like to say this, to not say this, to say this like this, to not say this like this, right? All these things as I'm going to go present this case study, or this, difficult case in which I'm getting feedback from the greater team in this like once a month meeting that we have with everybody. At the time, I'm like, okay, like she wants me to show up well in my best self, in this meeting. I don't like being told what to do. I don't like being told what to say. People can probably recognize that. However, this was a situation where like I'm on the bottom, not on the top. I mean, so like very on the bottom. And so so much on the bottom that like two supervisors above my supervisor would also be at this meeting. Okay. So I'm taking it in. But at the same time, I'm not quite understanding why it needs to be done this way or it needs to be said this way. So like I said before, I'm the queen of questions. If I don't get something, I will ask a question all day. Sometimes I don't like the answer, but I will certainly ask to try to get a better understanding. So I ask questions about why, about what does it do if I say it like this, over that, whatever. Got as much information as I could and then take a break. And step away from it, not talk about it more. And thankfully, there was some time in between me receiving this feedback and then actually having to present this case study in this larger monthly meeting that we had. And so those are some other trauma-informed care skills applied to self and used in the moment to manage the criticism well. Did not like what she was saying to me. You can't say it like this. You can't talk like that. You guys know, like I talk how I talk. I say what I say. It is what it is. There are good nuggets in there, but it's really hard to tailor your personality in like how you talk about things, right? Now, we need to take that in consideration. It's not like I was, being rude or judgmental or things like that. It was just, kind of the way you guys see it, me being me here, but that wasn't like professional enough for this greater meeting. So that was hard for me to take in, for me to understand why I needed to tailor what I was saying to sound more professional in this meeting. I had to ask some questions and then take a break to absorb that before I could apply any of that in the actual larger meeting where I had to present this case study. But I did take the feedback. I did present it differently in the meeting. I did follow up with my supervisor afterwards. I was affirmed or positively reinforced that I took those notes and did well. How I feel about it is completely different. Venting about it to coworkers, colleagues, and others. And at this point now, also looking at delivery and verbiage and things my supervisor used to not feel trauma informed. However, I did my best to use trauma informed care skills to receive that criticism, to not damage the relationship with my supervisor or all the other supervisors, right, in this greater meeting, and to not get reactive in the moment, which would have been just bad for my brain and body and my nervous system. I hope that makes sense. Okay, as we round the corner here, what is the impact of using trauma-informed care skills? Well, we want to apply these to self. because self-leadership is important. And it's the first step to trauma-informed leadership where we would lead or guide others. And it's the only way to ensure safety, is that when we take responsibility for itself. Safety is not assumed, safety is not given, and often safety is not given by somebody else. It is something that you find and create within yourself, despite contexts and situations. And using trauma-informed skills for self, applying it to self, is the only way to ensure that you will feel safe in any given moment, regardless of what's going on around you. Okay, so to dig into that just a little bit more, pausing, absorbing, considering, and processing that information that you received in the criticism allows your nervous system to reset and rebalance after getting that information, right? The pausing, absorbing, considering, and reflecting and processing. So we hear the criticism in this, 15-minute, 30-minute, hour-long meeting, whatever it is, and then we step away, right? That's the absorbing, considering, processing. So if you got sort of, or if emotions or nervous system activations kind of got kicked up during the receiving the criticism in the moment, taking some time away to allow it to absorb, let your nervous system sort of come back down before we respond to the person who gave us criticism or to the criticism itself, like applying things to adjust behaviors or performance, that kind of thing. Okay, asking questions, minimizing justification and defensiveness, and using active listening skills, all trauma-informed care skills, allows you to be present while receiving the criticism. I alluded to this earlier. Being present is also really good and healthy and yummy for our nervous systems. If we detach, if we're disconnected, if we're in our head about things, if we're in our feelings about things, it's difficult to be present and even take in the information in the moment. So pausing, absorbing, processing, trauma-informed care skills, asking questions, minimizing defensiveness, using active listening, reflecting back what you're hearing to make sure you're actually getting the information accurately, allows you to be present, all that trauma-informed care skills. Okay, so taking in potentially critical feedback isn't easy for anyone. And when we use trauma-informed care skills, it minimizes negative impact, aka harm, like I'm talking about here, and opens the door to finding safety amidst hearing difficult information about ourselves or our performance. This is why trauma-informed care is important for everybody in every industry, in every country across the globe. It's not only something that you can apply to how you interact with others, it is first and foremost something that you use to apply to how you interact and speak to yourself, how you manage difficult things in the moment, how you manage your nervous system activations, how you address your faulty beliefs, past scripts, negative thinking, anxious thinking, like whatever that could be getting in the way of creating a pathway for safety, either for other people or for yourself. We have to apply trauma-informed care skills to self, likely first and foremost, before we can offer that out to somebody else. It's also a great place to practice these before you're practicing with somebody else. I hope that makes sense. Excuse me. Sorry, my voice is really starting to fade, guys. Thanks for hanging in there with me. As we wrap up today, find my words. How can I, Sarah, help you manage criticism or manage criticism better? Well, there are some free options on my website. That's www.sarahobrienlcsw.com. Lots of good stuff on there, information, lots of free things. Go browse around, check it out. I have talks. I have podcast episodes. I have other podcast episodes. I have articles. I have handouts. I have all kinds of things that you can access for free. Lots of information there, specifically things that can help you manage criticism. Take my emotional intelligence quiz to figure out where you fall on the spectrum of having emotional intelligence. And then follow up with downloading my free emotional intelligence ebook to give you, I can't remember if it's like 15 or 17 or 18 things everybody should know about emotional intelligence. And then you could also grab my free mindfulness exercises ebook. So this gives you lots of different options to practice being mindful, which is another way of saying being present in the moment with whatever is there. And this is going to help us stay present in those difficult moments, like receiving feedback. If you want to dive a little bit further into your mindset, your scripts, caring for your nervous system, caring for yourself so that you can show up well and using trauma-informed care skills despite difficult circumstances, go grab my self-care, self-love, self-growth workbook. It's only $9. It's a digital download. You don't have to interact with me. Just go fill out the order form and it comes directly to your inbox. And it's going to give you a lot of good stuff to start looking inward, start doing some of that self-work so that you can apply trauma-informed care skills to yourself. If you want a more comprehensive in terms of like information, the science behind it, and more in-depth suggestions and how to create actual sustainable routines for compassionate self-care, I have a workbook for that. It is really great, guys. It is really comprehensive, and it goes through self-care through the ages at different stages of life, digital health, self-care, like a number of things that are relevant today. Digital self-care is really important with AI coming out. We need to be safe and like how we have boundaries around these things for ourselves. So spent a lot of time on these workbook guys based on lots of years of working with people, doing tons of my own work, and lots of collaboration with trauma-informed leaders and colleagues. So the Sustainable Care Routines workbook is $29. It's also a digital download. Just go fill out the form. It comes directly to your inbox. I also provide one-to-one coaching services if you want to learn some of these things with a guide, how to be present, how to be more emotionally intelligent, how to create sustainable self-care routines. I can help you do that in the one-to-one space. And people are really successful in the one-to-one space in working with me. And I have lots of years of experience of that in psychotherapy. I see people get to transformational change. I see people stick with that transformational change. When you have a trauma-informed and empathetic supportive guide, a lot of times what we can achieve is tenfold from what we're doing on our own. So although all of my workbooks are set up for a self-guided journey, if you get one and then schedule some one-to-one coaching sessions, it's going to give you more bang for your buck in like solidifying and cementing some new skills. I also offer business and executive consulting and coaching for C-suite, team leads, managers, HR, whomever, for healthier workplaces and psychological safety, learning how to give criticism using trauma-informed skills and receiving criticism using trauma-informed skills are huge in businesses. If you need help with that for your team, please reach out to me. You guys can fill out the contact form on my website, and that's just at www.sarahobrienlcsw.com/contact, or go to the contact tab on my website. Those are all the ways I can service you and help you. Again, I wear many hats, have lots of roles: licensed clinical social worker for Virginia and Maryland. I'm a trauma-informed leader and strategist, a subject matter expert in mental health and trauma-informed care, a speaker, trainer, and consultant. So lots of things and ways I can help you, lots of skills I possess. I think I forgot to say this in the beginning. I'm sorry in my fogginess. Thank you for everybody tuning in. Thank you, Andrew, for being here, and Andrew Stout and the Let's Be Diverse podcast sponsors the Healing Hour podcast. We overlap in some of our psychological safety and employee wellness views, initiatives, and leadership. That is why we are working together in this capacity. Go check his podcast out. He's had lots of amazing guests on. I will bring guests back. I'm hoping maybe in July, if not July, then August. I have more travel in July, and I'm really busy with some things. And July is like the worst month of the year for me with my traumatic grief reminders. So we'll see what that brings. I will be bringing you some shows. I just don't know what on. So be sure to tune in every Thursday at 11 a.m. or you can on LinkedIn, or you can catch it live and the replay on my YouTube channel. And that's just YouTube/@timeless_therapists. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Thanks for the few folks who are here, and let me know that you were here. I hope you learned something today. I hope it was helpful for you. I hope that you know you can show up as human, however human you are, including sick, under the weather, and with less energy. I appreciate you. Andrew says another great show, Sarah. I appreciate your steadfast support and always showing up and commenting and being here. You absolutely matter, Andrew. You matter to me. You matter to the world as well as everyone else. You are worthy. You have value. Don't let anybody tell you different, even yourself. Work on that self-care. Do the self-work. And if you want an amazing guide who is the hypest of hype cheerleaders, I'm your girl. Call me. I'm happy to help you get to the place that you want to be. Find me in everything that I do, have done, produced, can help you. One more time, that website is www.sarahobrienlcsw.com. Thank you, everyone. I will see you again next week. Topic unknown. Stay tuned. I'll put it out early for you. Happy Thursday, everyone. I hope you have a nice weekend. I'll